Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen. I work in the Office of Sustainability here at Tufts as the Recycling and Waste Reduction Fellow. This is our recycling town hall. It's part of our Earth Week because Wednesday is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. Thanks everyone who is here joining us. I'm also here with Tina Woolston, who is the Program Director of the Office of Sustainability, and Shoshana Blank, who is the Education and Outreach Administrator in our office. And I would like to introduce our main speaker for this event, Gretchen Carey. Gretchen is the Recycling and Organics Coordinator of our Waste Hauler Republic Services. She is our go-to person for all of our recycling questions that come up throughout the year. And she is the president of the board of directors for the statewide recycling group, MassRecycle, a lead green associate, as well as a member of the EBC Solid Waste Management Leadership Committee. So thanks, Gretchen, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kristen.
Yeah, so I want to run through the agenda for this event. The event will be divided into 5 sections. The first section is about recycling and COVID-19, specifically how the recycling industry has been impacted by the pandemic. The second section is about reducing waste, which is the first and most important step when it comes to waste stewardship. The third is about reusing different items. The fourth is about recycling. Everyone will have the opportunity to ask all of their how to recycle questions. And the fifth is talking about why it's important that we recycle, even during COVID-19. So there will be a few polls. People will have the opportunity to ask questions. They can do so using the Q&A feature they should see in their bottom panel. There will also be the opportunity to share ideas in the chat and raise your hand to ask a question. And on that note, we will start with the first section, recycling and COVID-19.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope that we will be able to answer a lot of your questions on things that are happening in the industry right now. Certainly, there has been a lot of hype about recycling and what's happening to it. We've definitely lost some ground in terms of things like the plastic bag bans. And so I'm going to talk to all of these different topics. So the first being recycling and COVID-19. How has it affected the recycling industry? For the most part, all right, I think that there's some misunderstanding as to how COVID is affecting the industry. There are some smaller recycling facilities that have had to shut down. It's probably not for the reasons you're thinking. All right, so we don't handle things with our bare hands on a good day, never mind during a pandemic, okay? So it is not about the amount of items coming in that might have COVID-19 on them. That's not our major concern. It's actually the fact that, as you can see on this conveyor belt here, there are many people working together to sort by hand. And the problem is they all come in at the same time, they all punch in, they all take their breaks at the same time, and they are standing close together. And that is the concern, is that there's not the ability to social distance, or at least there isn't in their normal pattern of behavior. In this case, we have, most recycling facilities have gone over to they've actually taken away the time clock so that there's not a gathering there. They have staggered lunches, they've staggered start times, and they have done as much as they can to make sure that there's actual distance between people, and occasionally even put pieces of plastic in between them so they're not breathing on each other. So that has changed things a bit. Go ahead, next question, Kristen. All right, so some municipalities are no longer taking recyclables, and that is actually because the facility, usually it's drop-off facilities that have shut down, and that's because people tend to they park their car, get out, and dump their material, and thus come into contact with each other. All right, there's a lot of lines, waiting, that kind of thing, and nobody wants people gathering at their places right now. So it's not usually curbside that's the issue, but drop-off areas. Will we bounce back? I believe we will. This is a temporary thing. This is not a permanent thing. It is something that I think we will adapt to as well. So for instance, if places have closed, they are going to get huge pushback from their residents because people want to recycle and don't want it building up in their house. So I think what you're going to see is perhaps a better plan for leaving space between people. Maybe it's people stay in their cars and workers unload the cars. We'll see, but I know, every time you try to stop people from recycling, they tend to clamor for it and force their folks to work it out. So I think we will bounce back from this. Next one. What is being misrepresented in the media? Yeah, okay. So when things are going along smoothly, you hear nothing. All right, let's start with that baseline. So when recycling is good, nobody's talking about it. When, however, a facility is stopping, or whether a drop-off is stopping its recycling, all of a sudden it hits the news. So you're only going to see the ones that are having problems. Understand that the majority of the system is still at work. All right. So it is not, what you're seeing is not representative of the number or the percent of what's actually having difficulties or actually closing down. Understand that there's a whole lot of recycling that's just going on, not quite business as usual, but with modifications.
Thanks, Gretchen. And we also wanted to open it up to the attendees of the town hall to ask any questions they have specifically about COVID-19 and recycling and how the COVID-19 has impacted the recycling industry, or the relationship potentially between health, a pandemic, and recycling in general. So if anyone has questions, please feel free to raise your hand or use the Q&A feature to ask a question at the end, so people will have more time to think about if there's anything they want to know.
I have a quick question related to it, actually. I compost at home because I subscribe to a composting service for my home. And, I actually, one thing I compost when I'm not sick is tissues and stuff. Because if you're not sick, that's a compostable item. And lately I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I, had COVID but didn't know it, I didn't have the symptoms, and I composted that tissue? Like, I wonder if there's, anything happening there. But that's kind of a... Sure.
No, it is one of those questions that, yeah, all of a sudden you start looking at everything you're doing, right? I actually think that it probably doesn't make any difference to the people picking up the composting. They were probably not touching all of your icky food waste with their bare hands in the first place. And hopefully everybody's, if you're wearing a pair of gloves, you peel it off and you wash your hands, right, when you're done. So if you did, the number of, bacteria, growths, mildew, fungus, whatever that you normally find on food, that should be reason enough not to be touching people's, scrap food, if you ask me. And it hasn't changed anything for us. I know, Republic as a hauler, if you have a small hauler, you should ask them, but I doubt very much that it's going to change. I would suggest that if you have a bucket, when you first bring in the bucket, that handle could have been held by somebody. That's one of those things where they could potentially transmit diseases. They found that COVID-19 stays on plastic for up to 72 hours. So if it has a plastic handle, just, treat that like you would anything else that you're bringing into your house. Give it a time for quarantine, wash your hands after you touch it, you should be fine. Okay.
That's a good question, Shoshana.
Thank you.
All right, so people can ask questions as we go or at the end of the presentation, and we'll move on to the next section, which is about reducing waste. Now, obviously, because of the pandemic, we are producing more waste in some areas, such as with our masks and our gloves. But there are some ways that we can continue to reduce waste, especially while staying at home all day, such as with food waste, which Gretchen will talk about a little bit later in this section.
If I could too, I just want to, what you said about masks, please absolutely trash your masks and your gloves. Okay, they are not recyclable in any way. Please also don't leave them. Apparently there's been a big uptick in littering of masks and gloves. I do not know why anybody would leave these things around for other people, but please be a good citizen and just make sure they make it into the trash bin. Okay. All right, so we have a hierarchy and established that things we'd like to see you do in order. So reduce, reuse, recycle, for instance, is a common phrase. We actually want you to do it in order of those words, all right? So reduce is the most important thing you can do. Make less waste in the first place, right? So a simple thing like taking your to-go cup with you, right? At this point, okay, that's tricky because of the germs, wouldn't suggest it. But at the same time, normally you will save hundreds of plastic cups if you're a big coffee drinker over the course of a year. And that's a lot. So it's absolutely, the best thing you can do is don't make that waste in the first place. Don't buy that product that has that extra packaging, so you have to figure out what to do with it. The next is reuse. That is your travel cup. You are reusing it, right? And therefore avoiding extra waste. That is the next thing. And that stands for a number of things that we'll go into, like clothing and furniture. Reuse that material, or give it to someone else to reuse. That way nothing new is being made or being wasted. Recycle. Absolutely recycle the things that we want you to recycle. We're going to talk about exactly what that is, but the fact is that if you throw in things that you think are recyclable, but we don't agree with you and it's not on our flyer, it will end up as trash, just more expensive trash, because we'll have sorted through it. Recycling is a great way to do something useful with the item after you have used it. It does not in any way make up for the fact that you used it in the first place. Okay, so the best is to avoid it, avoid using it. The next best is to find a second home for it. The third is to recycle it, all right? So don't focus on that as, well, I don't have to feel bad about buying it because I'm going to recycle it anyway. Please don't get that mentality. It's not good for any of us. Composting is strictly done with food and, as Shoshana was saying, paper products. That is a great way to make nutritional dirt, or if it goes to an anaerobic digester, it still makes a nutritional broth that can go onto the farms, local farms. A great way to divert about 30% of your total waste is to compost. It can be your yard waste or your food waste. And there's lots of ways to get in on a composting system. Just like Shoshana said, she has someone pick up locally. I personally have a big container in my backyard. Recovery. This is the idea that if it goes to a waste to energy facility and is incinerated, they create energy out of this material. The fact is that we keep making trash, and landfilling it is the last option because it literally is mummified and left in the ground in a hole. Nothing good is done with it at that point. And we don't want it to change. We don't want it to break down. Recovering energy from it is preferable, and that would be done through a waste to energy facility. So the last thing you want to do is trash it and send it to a landfill. All right, so somebody had asked a question about this, and this is something that I think is really important. There is a PBS special called Plastic Wars. It is a 55-minute special available on YouTube. I highly recommend seeing it. I will definitely say that for a person like myself who's a professional in the field, very big environmentalist, it was a lot like a kick in the gut. It's a history of plastics recycling as controlled by the plastics industry. And it definitely, it fits in with what I know about the industry in many ways, but I think I need to put a slightly different explanation or spin to it. It was incredibly well investigated and portrayed. I do not think that they were wrong in anything they said, and I don't even think that they were misleading in any way either. Okay, so it starts off in 1990 when there's an environmental movement, just like there is now, to lower the amount of plastic that we are creating. People realized it was bad for the environment, the water, everything, and said, we have a problem with this. That was 1970s. I hope I said that right. So the plastics industries obviously did not want to give up their market share, and therefore, rather than fighting that directly, they created the recycling systems. And that was their way of saying, see, we'll use this plastic again, and therefore it's a good thing for you to buy plastic. It's okay. Don't worry about that guilty feeling of polluting the planet, because we're going to make something new out of it. What it showed was that they knew it wouldn't be financially feasible in many ways. It's a challenging thing to have that many trucks going around, that many businesses working on it, but it was their way of distracting the public from the real problem, which is that there's too much plastic. The final math that they portrayed was that something less than 10% of the total amount of plastic on the planet gets recycled. I have heard that number a lot. I can't speak as to how true it is, but I can tell you that there are certainly places in America that do not recycle at all. There are entire countries that have not recycled previously. It's certainly, for the amount of plastic we've seen in the oceans, it's not impossible. All right. Then the show goes forward to the 1990s, where they show, once again, people are starting to move against plastic, and the plastic industry created a bunch of advertisements explaining why plastic is good for you and how it helps your lives. Once again, derailing people from protesting. And now here we are with another big protest against plastic. And I think this is a very timely show, explaining how we need to not let ourselves get derailed for the fact that we need to reduce the amount of plastic that's being created. It's all well and good that it is, at least the stuff that you are putting in the bin, okay, please understand that if you're putting it in the bin, especially in Massachusetts, it is going to get recycled, and if it is the correct item, and it is going to be sold mostly domestically at this point. PBS shows it going to smaller foreign countries. I'm trying to remember, Indonesia, I think is where the one they were showing. And the gist of it was they showed them burning the plastic, all right? Please understand, because it wasn't highlighted, but the idea was that this was the leftovers of the bales of plastic that countries like America are sending to them, all right? It's not the majority of the plastic. The majority of the plastic is being reused, recycled into something new, but a lot of what you saw that they said they were going to burn was film, which is that plastic stuff that we ask you not to put in. It includes plastic bags, dry cleaning bags, shrink wrap around your packaging, and a number of other things that are all film that we can't use in our system. So it is the contamination that we've been asking you to lower, and to not put things in that we're telling you specifically not to. It will not get recycled, and I really certainly don't want to see it end up on a foreign shore. So I think the end message is the plastics industry has been playing us for fools for a long time. And this is a really hard message for me, whose life is based on teaching about recycling. However, I think that we absolutely need to work on getting the plastic industry to be more responsible for what they are creating, because right now there's triangles they put on the bottom of it. That was, again, a messaging system, but whereby every recycler was meant to understand that all plastics were recyclable, and they are not. From the recycling industry point of view, they are absolutely not all recyclable. So it was misleading, and I would say purposefully. Please check out, when we talk in about 10 minutes about Recycle Smart, please look at what it is we're asking for and throw that in, and that only, all right? But start pushing back. As you saw earlier, I'm on I'm the president of a group called MassRecycle. Go to massrecycle.org and look up extended producer responsibility. This is what they are doing in Europe. It is how they control their plastic industry to make sure that there is less waste and that the things being made are all recyclable. It's a much better system than we have here, where we're hoping to get material that we can use in the recycling facility, and that people in general are misled into believing that we take everything. So I'm going to try to answer other questions as we go along, but I thought it was very important to address this, because I think that it is a worthwhile and fairly horrifying video, but that doesn't mean that we should give up recycling. It means that we should put pressure on the plastics industry and not take our eye off the ball on this. Do not be lulled into thinking that recycling is the fix-it for everything. It is not. It is after you've used something that is the best thing you can do with it. But if we can manage not to use it in the first place or not to create it. I'm also going to talk about recycled content and your need to be part of the recycling loop, but I'll talk to that in a few minutes.
Thanks, Gretchen, for talking about that. That was a question that we got in advance, and it's a really common question that people have about the recycling industry. So we'll move on to a poll. We're still in the reduce section, and we'll talk a little bit about reducing food waste now, which is something you could do from home. And here, I think everyone should be able to see the poll now. So we'll give just a minute or two for people to start answering the questions. It's an interesting question because since we're at home and we're trying to eliminate grocery trips or trips to the grocery store as much as possible, that can have interesting outcomes with regards to how much food waste we produce, whether or not it's more or less, given that we're at home social distancing. So it looks like we have about 52% of you all voted, and some of you, it looks like most of you are producing a slightly less food waste, but about a quarter of you think that you are producing more food waste. So that's interesting to know. We'll keep the poll going, and Gretchen can start sharing some ideas for how to reduce food waste at home. In the meantime, if you have any of your own ideas, you can also leave those thoughts in the chat.
Okay. Do you mind, please, Kristen, moving that to the side so that I can see the slide?
The poll?
Yeah, please. I don't know if you have the ability to.
Can you see it here?
Nope. Okay.
No?
Okay, so it's all right. I'll work around. Okay.
Here.
I think you have to close it, Kristen.
Yeah, I'm gonna end the poll here.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so understand that, and congratulations to those of you who are making less food waste than usual. You have bucked the inherent feeling of wanting to stock up on things that are not really stockable. For instance, it is not uncommon for people to say, well, I'll get an extra gallon of milk while I'm here because what if I can't get back for a while? And we all know that milk only lasts so long. So that tends to be one of those things that you regret later, but it is absolutely human nature to overbuy in desperate times, okay? And so a couple of things that I would suggest. One is to organize your fridge with the oldest stuff in the front. We all have that habit of putting in new stuff in the front, and then the old stuff just gets older in the back until you find it one day and it's a science project. So I recommend moving things around so that every time you add more, you find your older food and can eat it rather than wasting it. There are some, I did some research, and there's a great website for things like rice, pasta, cheese, and bread that are really common leftovers. So if you have, this much spaghetti left over and you're just sick of spaghetti, there's a lot of really great ways that you can make that into something more interesting. So I would check out greatest.com and search for leftovers, and there was just a pile of things that you could do with any one of those 4 items, plus a lot of other things that looked really good. Also, there's a site called Move for Hunger that had clever food tips, ways to, once again, reduce wasting food and things to do with it. And if you happen to know your neighbors, they might appreciate your extra food. If you did find yourself an extra gallon of milk, for instance, you might leave a sign out saying, if anybody needs milk, I have extra. If you, whatever it is you've come up with, so consider sharing, and otherwise, extra milk, for instance, can be made into things like quiche or pudding. Everybody likes a treat in a time like this, so consider going out of your normal comfort zone and figuring out what you could make out of that extra food. Plenty of recipes online. Any questions? Or I'll keep talking while you look at the questions.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sure. Okay. So creative ideas for things that are in your fridge. You can make soup stock from bones. I don't know if you've ever made your own bone broth or bouillon. If you end up with a turkey or a ham bone, like the entire turkey carcass, you put it into a giant pot and boil it for an hour or 2. And it ends up as collagen and really tasty broth that you can then use to make as a base for soups later. Same thing with vegetable tops. I've understood things like carrot tops are good for things like making veggie stock. Wilted veggies are still good in soup. They may not look good on a salad, but you know, those whether it's beet greens or anything else can be useful. Try growing new plants from your veggie tops or bottoms. This is something I tried just because I'm in a gardening thought process. And for instance, I found tomatoes in the back that had gone bad. And the internet says you can slice them thin and put them under a layer of dirt and they will grow. And sure enough, I have tomato plants coming up, which normally I'd go out and buy them. So it's nice to be saving that money as well as the need for a trip. Clean out the fridge soup. I have always made this. You take I don't know, noodles and I don't know, that half a cup of corn and that last few bit of peas and leftover chicken. Clean out the fridge soup. Very good stuff. But yeah, growing things is a nice way to stay positive in a time like this. So you never know what is, I mean, my onions volunteer to grow regularly. Yeah, they're getting more useful as I go along. All right, I'll pause for questions. Go ahead, Kristen.
All right, well, it looks like we have received a few questions. None of them are specifically about reducing food waste, but we do have a question from this section about more about the plastic industry.
Sure.
And it says, how do we put pressure on the plastic industry to extend producer responsibility?
A lot of that will be done through legislation. Check out on the MassRecycle website. There's quite a lot of information there for you about how you can become part of the system, but reaching out to your legislator is a great way to say, you know, we need to do something about this. I saw this show, I heard this information, and I want to get involved, and I want you to get involved. You know, this is not sustainable, what we're doing now. So it is all about legislation, but the more people who push behind that and who talk to their legislators, the more pressure there is on the system. Thank you.
We have a few more questions, but we'll save them for a little bit later, just so we can stay on track. The next section is about oh, yes?
Okay, so just a thought too. When you are buying, okay, your money is voting for you, whether you realize it or not. So when you buy something that is just overly packaged, you are inspiring the plastic industry and you're supporting them. And I don't think that's probably what you want to be doing if you're on this webinar. So, you know, consider buying things that are in less packaging, considering buying, you know, differently. Look at how things are packaged and pick the one that is most aligned with what you believe sustainably. All right.
That's a good point. So the next section is about reuse and repurposing. So how can we reuse the items that we already have rather than dispose of them in any of the ways that we've discussed that you can dispose waste. So Gretchen will take it away first, talking about donating.
Okay. I don't know, I know this is really popular amongst my friends and I get the impression it was nationwide. About a day or two into being stuck in my home and asked not to go out, I started looking around me and said, what is all this stuff we have in this house? What is all of this? Why do I have this many clothes? What is all of, why? And I think apparently this was not uncommon. It was spring cleaning time. Okay, there's that. But you just realize when you're kept in your house that you probably have a lot more material goods than you actually need, okay? And so therefore donating has become a national sport at this point. The question arose as to, are nonprofits and charities still taking donations? These items are durable goods, okay, so clothing and furniture that can be reused by someone else, all right, in the same condition they are in. You should take them to a donation drop-off box. They do not belong in the recycling bin at all, okay? Two separate streams entirely. There are systems where you can call them and they will come to you. Some of them are still running. The donation bins that you drop them off to, which are usually behind schools and churches and banks and things like that, they are still going. They are considered essential workers because if that piles up, it becomes a health hazard. And so, for instance, I don't think you can go to Salvation Army and shop at this point, but they are taking in goods. So please consider donating what you do not need. Go right ahead, and especially a lot of people will question the whole, like, it's missing a button, it's ripped. That's depending on the company that you're taking it to, that may be totally okay with them. I know certain companies are fine in that they will downcycle it, they call it, making it into rags that will then be sold for painters and mechanics. So it can go on to have a second life, even if it's not something that somebody will wear. So they are still taking donations. What do they take? You should probably look on their website, so that each bin should have the name of the company on the side of it. Please go take a look and see what their rules are. All right. Some of them are happy to take your clothing, but don't want your statuettes or your dishes. Some of them will take all of the above. So that's on an individual basis. But there are over 20 million people who are out of work now. These donations might mean a lot to somebody down the road. So please consider, instead of putting them in your trash, please consider taking them to a drop off or holding them in your house until we all are free to roam about the country again. All right, getting creative, upcycling. This means making something new out of something you already had. So for instance, I do a lot of these webinars, and I have a very busy backdrop, I've been told. It's a library shelf, and lots of things going on and therefore distracting. So I have upcycled an old garment rack. I have used a piece of wood across the top and a bed sheet to make my backdrop, so that okay, maybe I look like I look like I'm in a tent, but at the same time, it is not distracting to you, and that's a bonus. So this is a version of upcycling. It's things that you have in your house that you can either reuse or repurpose rather than throwing away. If you're a person who likes to do a lot of planting, which a lot of us, I think, have found a new hobby in gardening, you are probably going to have plastic containers in your house that could become useful plant holders and things like that for growing. I think Shoshana was going to share something with us here. Okay, Shoshana has a plant holder. What is that made out of? Is it a box? Is it a?
It's an olive oil tin where you buy, bulk olive oil.
Very nice. Very nice. I have started taking old tea tins and painting them and decorating them. So when you get tea from certain companies, that they come in tins rather than boxes, and I paint them and then use them for loose leaf tea that I order through the mail, that comes in flat packages. And understand, in the grand scheme of things, let's just touch on this shortly, looking at if you cannot recycle an item, a better choice might be a flat package, which is smaller and less wasteful than an item that you cannot recycle but is three-dimensional. That makes sense. So we'll go into what is recyclable, but just understand the flat packages can be a very good option. Tina?
Yeah, this is my new trash can. This is basket.
Very nice. It could be, once you start looking around, I kind of had to stop thinking, I can't get at what I want off the internet, and instead thinking, if I were living on an island, how would I manage this, right? How would I accomplish the same goals, but smarter, right? And once you start looking around, we, as Americans, we have so much stuff in our lives generally. So I, for instance, was looking at buying these squares that you can put in your garden to walk on, so that they keep the plant growth out from underneath them. You have a little walkway. I can't get those squares right now, but at the same time, I found an old yoga mat that I thought I could cut up and make into squares that would work for the same reason. So you start thinking more creatively, I guess, is what it comes to. We wanted to encourage people to if they had any specific items they had upcycled, please feel free to post them in the chat or raise your hand and tell us about it.
I'll just note from the chat that someone was talking about the Buy Nothing Facebook pages, such as Buy Nothing Somerville, Buy Nothing Medford, neighborhood days where people post what they have, and those are still running really well during this time. So that was a great comment.
That's terrific. I was wondering how those are doing. I know I have a pile of old construction paper that I thought some parent might really appreciate for their kids, but when I was cleaning, found that. So I'm glad to hear that's still going. That's good. That's a
We
great
have one question, Gretchen, on about concerning reusables, especially like to-go cups. What are your thoughts on how the perception of reusables has been hurt by COVID-19 developments?
one.
There was already a perception that by some reusables are dirty. Do you think they will bounce back and can recover from the hit they've taken?
Yeah, this is disappointing to be sure. Okay, certainly we were just really getting traction with reusable cups and things like that. I think that the cup thing might be different later, and I think that we won't even go back to shaking hands again, honestly. I think because people, after 6 months of being, like, whoa, don't touch me, don't get near me, I think that there are going to be things in society that change. I am hoping certainly that we can go back to that with reusable cups, because I don't know, so many of us are so against using, cup after cup after cup. I will also speak to reusable grocery bags. This became a thing. I will absolutely tell you the plastic industry are the ones telling you that somebody's going to catch COVID-19 from your reusable bag. Okay, so be aware who is sending out that message, and they must be loving the fact that this happened just now, because it means they have a pseudo-scientific basis for saying so. The fact is that if you bring your bags into the grocery store, technically they could have your germs on them. Not disagreeing with that. At the same time, so do your clothes. Okay, bag, if they let you, do not hand it to someone else to pack. Pack it yourself. Okay, and when you get home, wash off that bag in some way, because it'll have germs coming back out with you. All right, are plastic bags better? In fact, from what I've seen, they're probably worse in terms of the fact that the plastic actually holds COVID-19 for 72 hours, as opposed to clothing, which holds it for less. So I tend to think that, I personally, we take all our plastic bags off, ball them in together, and put them to this side to let them sit, because we don't want to be touching any of that. We've had everything that's being delivered is coming in plastic bags from grocery stores, and it kills me. But I haven't been out personally to shop, so I haven't seen how my grocery store is treating them. But I absolutely believe we can go back to reusable bags later. I'm hoping that coffee cups will be accepted again, but understand who is pushing against us, and it's the people making the single-use plastic items. Okay.
Thanks, Gretchen. And we will move on to the next section now, where hopefully we'll be able to answer some of questions specifically about how to recycle certain items. So first, Gretchen will go over, just spend a few minutes talking about the recycling rules, and then we'll take questions about, how do I recycle blank? But you can also ask more broad recycling questions in this section as well. But I will add, now would be a good time, if you do have questions about how to recycle something, to start putting those in the chat or in the Q&A section, so that we can answer those once Gretchen is done going through the explanations.
Sure. Okay. So this is Recycle Smart. This is the statewide recycling initiative put together by the Department of Environmental Protection and all of the recycling facilities in Massachusetts. Okay. So these are the things we really want on the top line. Okay. If you don't see it, short version, if you don't see it there, don't throw it in. All right. There are a few exceptions. But if you live with people who don't want to think too hard about it, or if you're trying to talk to other people about it, just point them at the top and say, if you don't see it, don't put it in, right? Metal, we are looking for cans that you either ate or drank out of, or your pet did. We don't want shovels, lawnmower blades, scissor blades. We just want cans. We want them clean and empty, please, and dry. Plastics, all right, we talked about that plastic triangle. Not everything with a triangle on it is recyclable. That is misleading, and it's put there by the manufacturers, not by those of us who recycle things. All right. What we are looking for in plastic is containers with lids. They don't have to have the lids, but if they have the lid, please empty out the container and put the lid back on. Okay. So we're looking for bottles, jars, jugs, and tubs, laundry detergent, margarine tubs, all of those things, okay? So empty them, give them a quick rinse. If you have something like oil or laundry detergent, please put the lid on, put it on its head overnight, get your money's worth in the morning, and then use an old paper towel or a napkin that's already dirty to clean out the throat of the bottle, okay? The mouth of the bottle. And then put the lid back on. Anything smaller than a credit card will fall through into my glass pile and not get recycled properly. So I'm asking you to put the lid back on or don't put it in at all right? We do not want Legos, dogs, toys, things like that. It's all about containers with lids. Glass, we are taking glass and doing the best in Massachusetts, so best thing we can with it. In some cases, it's about making it into a new glass bottle. Some bottles do go there out of state. We don't have a way to do that in state currently. The other thing is to process it to what's called processed glass aggregate, which then gets used in all kinds of roadway projects like sand. I'll talk more about that later. Paper and cardboard, we will take anything that comes in the Sunday paper. We're happy to take magazines, old notebooks. We don't want hardcover books, but we will take softcover books, paperback books. Pizza boxes, if they are minimally greasy, we will take them. Please take out the pizza. We do not want really greasy cardboard. We will take your plastic, your cardboard boxes flattened, please, so there's room, and so they fall easily into our truck. You can leave on the tape, the packaging, the labels, the staples, the paper clips, the binder clips, and the windows of the envelopes. Those are all okay. We just don't want things that are covered in food or drink, please. All right, across the bottom, oops, quick list of things across the bottom. No plastic bags, capital letters, okay? We don't want your recyclables in plastic bags unless you are a resident of the city of Boston. They're having you put yours into plastic bags. You're the only ones. We do not want single-use plastic bags. Those should go back to the grocery store. We do not want drink and food or drink. We just want your containers, not what came in them. Clothing and linens, we talked about you taking those to a donation bin. And tanglers are things that make a mess out of our machinery. They get wrapped around the moving parts of our machinery and bring us to a halt. So please do not throw in things like garden hoses, ropes, chains. Those are all donatable items. They are not recyclable items. All right, and plastic bags are the worst. So if you want to know more, you can go to recyclesmartma.org. It's a great website with lots of information on it. It has this flyer, so you could print it out yourself. It also has what we're about to use next, which is, go ahead. Oh, no.
First, we'll walk through some of these rules that you already discussed a bit.
we'll show that. Okay, so recycling rules are empty, clean, and dry, please. Okay, no foods or liquids. That means if you have half a soda left and you put the cap back on, it will not sort. That bottle will not sort. It is too heavy to get sorted properly. So please empty all of this stuff out. People are handling this. Don't leave them with your leftover food. And no tanglers, please. Go ahead.
And we did get a question, how clean does the recycling have to be? So, okay. You know, does it need to be pristine or? Okay.
Your average drink, unless it has milk in it, can probably just be dumped out or finished, okay? If it's food, I should not be able to tell what you had for lunch or what was in that can, okay? So, you know, if there's a little bit left, that's not as big a deal. Quick rinse is usually how I put it, or a quick rinse with a brush, all right? Get the majority out. Don't just keep running water over it. We do not want you to waste water on something that's really challenging. This is all about conserving resources, not spending more resources to save a piece of plastic, okay? So no gallons of water, just a quick rinse and a brush should do the job. Thank you.
Great. And now we will be answering your recycling questions. So if anyone had a question about a specific item, we will actually answer that using the Recyclopedia on Recycle Smart MA. And if people had, I think there were a few other questions that are kind of not about specific items, Gretchen can answer those afterwards. So
okay, the first question that's related is which recyclable is the most valuable or best to recycle? So if I have an option to buy something in glass or aluminum or cardboard, which should I choose?
Okay. If you know you're going to be recycling the container, thanks for the question. I go with metal. Okay. We will that metal will absolutely get used as metal again. Okay. Plastic would probably be my second choice if it is like a water bottle or soda bottle, because lots of good things can be made out of plastic bottles. And I will explain in a few minutes what those are. The glass in this area gets downcycled, so it'd probably be my last choice. But that's the order in which I would do it. Thank you for asking. And yeah, it's really tough when we're trying to talk about, reducing the amount of plastic. What exactly should we be using instead, right? I'm a fan of aluminum as long as it's getting recycled, because aluminum can be infinitely recycled and will go on to be things like bicycles and airplanes and trains. Anything made out of sheet aluminum can be made out of cans.
Great, thank you. Now, another sort of related is during the COVID period, while bottle and can recycling is suspended, should bottles and cans go in the regular recycle bins? So I guess this is like the returnables that you get money for.
Oh,
I guess it's been suspended.
Right, sure, because you can't take them to the grocery store and put them in. Absolutely, we will happily take those and recycle them for you.
One last one from earlier. Have you seen an uptick in the number of plastic bags contaminating the recycling more than they usually do now that the plastic ban bags have been lifted?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I actually don't know the answer. I have not asked that question of the recycling facility, but
okay.
Good question.
And then Kristen, I think these next ones are for the Recyclopedia.
All right.
The first one is rubber.
So I'm going to, all right, so here we are. We're on recyclesmartma.org, our favorite website. Here's the Recyclopedia, and I'll just type in rubber. As you can see, when I typed it, a lot of different options of different types of rubber came up. And this is a great resource because whenever any question comes up, you can use this on your own and find out the answer. So it looks like they want to know something more specific. So I will put in rubber gloves because we're all wearing gloves a lot these days. And it says put this item in your trash bin.
That's right. So my answer for that as well, since you have to kind of be more specific, is that we do not want rubber items. We're looking for plastic, glass, metal, or paper and cardboard. Okay, rubber is not plastic, it's not the same thing, and it's definitely not likely to be in a container form, which is what we're looking for.
Kristen, the next one is wax coated cardboard.
Ooh, good question.
All right, wax coated, there we go, waxed
That's a
cardboard.
good one.
Yeah. So this says to either compost it or put it in the trash. If compost is not available, then you would put it in the trash.
Correct. It's not the same thing as regular cardboard, but that was a great question. Tricky.
Yeah.
The next one is black colored plastic.
Oh, that's a great question.
Super common. Yep.
Yep, that goes in the trash. And the reason for that is the optical sorters at the recycling facility do not identify black plastics.
But note, it says that the lids are okay because if they're clear.
Mm-hmm. And I would go one step farther to say, talk to your vendor and see if they can use any other color than black. Okay. I know I've been preaching this for a long time in the Boston area. And now when I go in to see events, and go into to present, I find, for instance, Tufts has gone over to white instead of black, which is awesome. And can we get something better in there so that we can recycle it? And the answer is yes. If enough people are interested and the vendor gets enough requests, the chances are good they'll go over to a different color. And it doesn't matter what color as long as it's not black.
And the last one we have right now is toner cartridges because Staples has temporarily discontinued them. So are there other options?
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. The answer is, Kristen?
Put this item in your trash bin. However, there are many take-back programs for toner cartridges, including one at Staples, which, as is evidenced in the question, has just been discontinued. Gretchen, I don't know if you have any more information about other possibilities for toner take-back programs at the moment.
Well, I would say that rather than discontinued, I would say suspended. And I would say, I don't know how many toner cartridges you're creating, but if you had more than, I don't know, 2 left over after a few months, I'd be surprised. So I would suggest, if you can, just putting them in a corner somewhere and, wait on that one. That system will come back up again.
Yeah, and also many like inkjet cartridges or toner cartridges, when you buy the next one, you'll notice that there's instructions on the box for how to return the existing one. So sometimes if you've had it in your printer for a long time, you no longer have that, but when you buy the next one, sometimes they come with an envelope, especially the inkjet cartridges come with an envelope, and then sometimes the big toner cartridges come with like instructions on how to mail them back. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I also, speaking to your buy nothing comment earlier, it is possible that people have local businesses kind of refilling these things. That would not surprise me. So you might put it out on a buy nothing and see if people want it.
That's true. Roxbury Toner used to refill them. It was, I don't know whether it's still in existence, but it was. Follow-up question about the waxed cardboard. So does that mean don't recycle milk or juice cartons? So I don't know, Kristen, if you want to type in that or just let.
That's also a very good question.
Yep.
And the answer is that those should go into the trash.
Those used to be recyclable in this state, so you were not misunderstanding it. But in 2018, when we made the new guidelines, those went into the trash. The reason being that they are a very small fraction of the total recycling. And we as a recycling facility have to wait until we have a whole truckload of them before we can sell them to someone. And so the idea is that they would end up stacking up for months on end in order to get enough of them. And considering they're usually filled with milk and orange juice, it was a bit of a hazard by the time we finally got to that point. So we no longer take them here. There's also not any facility in the area that can deal with recycling multiple layer items like that. So the other thing that went out is aseptic packaging, which includes things like water in a box, Trader Joe's soup in a box, bouillon stock, that kind of thing. All of those items are all trash now.
I think this would follow, sorry, someone just followed up, which is that freezer good, boxes holding freezer goods. So like boxes with freezer pot pies, that would fall into the same category.
Right. They're a layer of plastic on top of cardboard, and that makes it harder for us to recycle. It, however, makes it so the box doesn't disintegrate in the vaguely wet environment of the freezer.
All right, that's it.
All right. So if people have more recycling questions, they can use the Recyclopedia. And we can also talk a little bit at the end, but in the last few minutes, I do want to finish reviewing the final section, which is, here we go, it's about why we recycle. So Gretchen will talk about why we recycle, but first we just wanted to have a little poll, which is right over here, asking what is our most important reason for recycling. So whether it be the climate change implications behind landfills, the environmental justice implications for landfills, because the state of Massachusetts legally requires us to recycle, the circular economy, or another reason, we are interested in knowing what your most important reason is for recycling. And so far it looks like everyone has said climate change. We have someone else who said other. So if you do say other and you want to share why in the chat, that could be interesting for us to see. It looks like some people, it's environmental justice. 2 people say the economy.
It's good. You're right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So I'll end the poll here with climate change coming in at 71%, and the next biggest option being environmental justice, followed by the economy, and a few people said other as well. All right. So Gretchen will talk a little bit about the circular economy as a reason for why we recycle.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, so what a lot of people don't know is when we say, okay, we'll take your recycling, We put it through the recycling facility and it gets sorted out into piles, right? Piles of water bottles, piles of milk jugs, different items, paper, etc. We then take one of those piles, crush it together in a machine, wrap a wire around it, make a bale, like a bale of hay, except it's like a 2,000-pound bale. And you can see bales of aluminum cans behind me in this picture here. So those are then purchased by a manufacturer or secondary processor to make into something new, okay? So those aluminum cans are gonna go on to be, like I said, a plane, a bicycle, a whole lot of things. So this is the part where I ask you to consider buying sustainably, because we all spend money on something, and it used to be every day, it's probably less now, but anyway, you're spending this money to buy things. Please think about what you're buying and whether there is an item that's equivalent that is made out of recycled content, okay? So if you go to buy paper for your printer, can you get paper that is made out of recycled paper rather than trees? If you go to get, for instance, new carpeting, that can be made out of plastic water bottles. Water bottles are polyester fiber, can be made into polyester fiber, and that can be made into carpeting or clothing. There are lots of different things. When you go to buy a laptop bag, look to see if there's something that is made out of recycled content. That's what they call it. When you do, what happens is you put it into the bin, you recycle it into the bin. I take the bin away. I put it through a recycling facility where they sort it all out and make bales out of it. I sell the bale to a manufacturer, and the manufacturer makes an item. When you buy the item, you are closing the loop. When you don't buy the item and no one buys the item, the manufacturer has no reason to make the item, which means he has no reason to buy my bale of materials, and the whole system comes undone. What we need right now is pushing on manufacturers to use recycled content. So the more you buy things with and make a point of buying things that have recycled content, the more the manufacturers will say, oh, well, that's apparently the big thing, so I'm going to make that. That could be something as simple as always buying the Kleenex, the toilet paper, the paper towels, the napkins that you buy could all be made out of recycled paper instead of trees, right? So consider what your money is worth and make it vote for you every time you spend it. And not everybody, I mean, it's not going to be 100% of the time that you are able to find something, but it's probably far more often than you would guess. So please support the entire industry and push back on the plastics industry by saying we want recycled plastic in our items. A lot of companies have stepped up strictly due to peer pressure. Things like Nike and Adidas, where they're now going to be making their sneakers out of recycled content, plastic, recycled plastic. And that is a very good thing for the market, and that helps us make the whole system more sustainable and more affordable. So what happens when you recycle these items? A heck of a lot of people have no idea what things become, so we thought we'd do this. Plastic bottles, like the ones you see on the left, can become things like carpeting, I believe is what that is. Is that a dorm carpet? Is that what that looks like, Kristen? So carpeting, I found this out when I went to do an Earth Day table and try to explain to people what recycling becomes, and was floored to find out that there are many vendors that make carpeting out of recycled material, out of, like I said, bottles become polyester fiber, PET plastic does. So when you go to, for instance, LL Bean, they have entire carpets that are made out of recycled plastic. There are shoes at Rothy's made out of recycled plastic. Their clothing, Polar Fleece is frequently made. Patagonia has entire, runs of clothing that are all recycled plastic. So lots of useful things to make out of that. Paper goes into new paper. That shouldn't be a huge surprise. I'm happy to say that right now we're seeing an uptick in the interest for recycled paper because of the toilet paper situation and because of the number of boxes that are being used to ship to everyone. So paper and cardboard are seeing a revival based on the market, based on manufacturers needing more material. So that is all good things for us. The aluminum cans, we talked about bicycles, trains, planes. They can become more aluminum cans. That's about the least exciting thing they can become. And the last one is glass bottles. And those can be made into new glass bottles. That's more likely to happen when you put them into a return vending machine at the grocery store. A lot of it locally is being made into processed glass aggregate, which basically glass is made out of sand in the first place and kind of gets returned to processed down to small granular bits that are a lot like glass and can get used in local projects. So for instance, when they would normally use sand to put down a sidewalk or a deal with a culvert roadway projects, those can get used in local projects. So that's glass. So we are still absolutely doing the best we can with all of the materials that you are giving us, okay? Just please be sure to give us only what we ask for. That's super helpful. And definitely we don't want plastic bags. So I don't know, when you asked about plastic bags in the system, I couldn't speak to now whether they're getting more. I can tell you though that the bag bans that have happened in Massachusetts were a huge help to cleaning up the recycling system. So it definitely worked the other way. I'm hoping we don't start seeing them again in our bins. All right.
All right, thanks, Gretchen. We will just go to the last slide here and take any questions that remain. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us for the Recycling Town Hall today. If you need to run off and you have more questions, you can always email recycle@tufts.edu. The recycling team at Tufts runs that email and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. You can also visit our website, go.tufts.edu/recycle. So did we have any questions that we didn't get to yet? If people are sticking around to ask anything, or we just got one. If my oil comes in a can but has a plastic lid, should I take the lid off before recycling?
Your oil. What kind of oil? If it is, okay, in a can.
Olive oil.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that works. Okay. I would take that cap off and throw it away. I would not, because otherwise it's going to get squished into a bale of metal and they're not going to want it. Thank you.
All right, does anyone else have any final questions?
People often ask about glass bottles and can I put the lid back on my pickle jar, for instance? And the fact is that yes, that metal pickle jar lid has a steel base and is therefore, we can recover that with a magnet. If it is a glass bottle, like a wine bottle for cheap wine, where it's got a little aluminum lid, it's not gonna make it through the system, so don't bother putting it back on.
There's one, Kristen, there was just one last comment. I answered it in the Q&A, but it looks like it didn't go out and other people might be interested. It was, can the manufacturer save money by utilizing recycled materials, or does that cost them more than new raw materials?
Totally depends on the oil market.
Yeah.
So, it is a world economy for sure. So right now, oil is something like negative $40 a barrel. It's unbelievably low, which means that processing and using recycled plastic is going to be more expensive. If oil was very high, recycled plastic would be the better option. So it is all about the commodities and where they're at. However, that doesn't mean that the manufacturer should let off the hook for using recycled plastic. It should absolutely still be something that we're asking for, because if they're going to make it, they should be responsible for making it into something new. So please continue to encourage them. And that could be something as simple as writing an email, text, supporting somebody who is using recycled content. They want to hear from you in a positive way. And the best thing you can do is make their competitor look good, if that's the way it works,
All right, so if there are no more questions, for those of you who are still around, I'll run the final poll, which was just for us to know if we ever do something like this again in the future, which sections of this town hall you found most useful. So the first section was about COVID-19 and recycling. The second was about reducing waste. We talked about reducing plastic waste as well as food waste. The third was about reuse, including donating and upcycling. The third was answering all recycling questions. And the fourth was about why we recycle. looks like people really liked the recycling section.
Okay.
All right, thanks guys. That's all. Thanks for joining.
Stay
Bye.
safe, everybody.